What we're going to do is give each panelist a few minutes. I know AI is a huge topic and there's a lot to discuss, and I think this is a topic that we're going to continue to be discussing through upcoming London International Shipping Week and also other conferences. So what we're going to do is give each panelist a few minutes to kind of go through their view and specialty. We have a great group of panelists. I'll let each one of them introduce themselves as we go through. We have a couple of questions to kind of spark the discussion. And I think the most meaningful panels that I've been involved in always open the questions up to the audience. You guys have experience from different areas that you work in and involved in. So as we're kind of going through the discussion, be ready to throw questions to the panelists. And if it's the hard one, I'll just deflect to these guys and pretend. So
we'll keep deflecting back.
Right. So we want to have a good discussion about this because this is definitely an interesting topic. As we look at AI and what the potential is right now in the world, we're just scraping the surface with that as we see ChatGPT come to fruition and what's happening with that and language. But AI is going to permeate our industry to a pretty wide extent as we continue to go forward. So there's a lot of potential opportunities when you look at the navigation side or cybersecurity, communication, engine systems maintenance, almost all aspects of commercial shipping, even into the movement of cargo and goods around the world more efficiently, and not just on board the ship, but how cargo moves through the entire supply chain from origin to destination, so through trucks and trains. And it's going to be interesting to see the influences on AI with that. I've been in the maritime industry for 29 years, and it's been interesting to see the changes that have happened just in that time period. I've worked in different aspects of the industry. I spent 8 years with the U.S. Coast Guard, and then from there have worked for different larger and smaller companies that have dealt with ports, maritime operations, cruise lines, large yachts, and then the commercial cargo industry. So I have a pretty wide swath and have spent most of my time in maritime security and have seen a pretty interesting evolution of maritime security in that time frame when, 20-some years ago, we didn't even consider cybersecurity, and now it's become the forefront of a lot of discussions and IMO regulations and regulations with different governments around the world. So it's been interesting to see the evolution of security, and now, AI is as part of that. At Dryad, we really concentrate on a couple of different areas. We work in the risk intelligence space. So what that is we provide information on safety, security, geopolitical events to our clients globally to help them in the decision-making processes about where they're trading or where they want to trade, where they're operating, where they're going. We work across the commercial industry, the cruise, and the large yacht industry. So it's an interesting mix of clients that we have the opportunity to work with. And a few years ago, we started a project with a university in the United States to start to investigate the very beginnings of artificial intelligence and how that can help our intelligence analysts. And what we were looking at and how the project started was there's so much information that's available globally. How can we rapidly distill that down into a usable form? So through the university, we started out to build machine learning models to be able to look through data, to correlate data to specific events that then would go to our analysts to be able to help them with the analysis piece very quickly, because it's about trying to get information out to our clients as quickly as possible to help them make the best decisions based on what their operations are. So we've been involved in very early AI and machine learning and are now looking at how do we take that to the next level to provide better and more analysis to our clients, again, increasing the pace of that flow of information through what we're doing. So that's part of the business. The other part is cybersecurity. We're launching this month a suite of cybersecurity services specific for the maritime industry and specifically for shipboard, and AI is a big part of that. Is how do we use AI when we look at cybersecurity and the risks and threats to global shipping and ships? Because ships are very different when you look at it from the perspective of an IT network and cyber, of how you protect a ship different than how you protect, a law firm, a hospital, a financial institution. So there's a much different application and a lot more restrictions on protecting a ship. And one of the interesting things, I've been to a number of cybersecurity and AI conferences over the past year and a half, and it's interesting to see some of the research that's happening in the field. And one of the things that I thought was interesting and scary at the same time was there was a company that's working to put AI against AI. So AI trying to hack a system while AI is trying to protect that system, and the evolution and learning of AI versus AI. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens with that, and how AI will help to advance cyber security, but also the potential for hacking and how cyber will be used, or AI will be used on that side of it. So today we're going to go through AI based on our panel. We have an awesome panel today of experts who have very interesting opinions. We're going to talk about the opportunities, but as you know, there's also some challenges. Jonathan and I had a great conversation before that, and from the legal perspective, there's a lot of interesting, opportunities and challenges. So with that, I'd like to introduce Jonathan with Norton Rose Fulbright, our host for the panel.
Right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Norton Rose. Thank you very much for coming. We're delighted to host the session this morning. So I'm John Ball, one of the partners here at the firm. First thing I'll say is I'm not a shipping lawyer or a maritime expert, so please don't ask me any difficult questions about that. I've got colleagues here in the room that I'll defer to on those questions, but I'm an intellectual property lawyer, technology lawyer, and that's really been my entry into the world of legal advice around AI. As Corey says, this panel is about opportunities. I feel slightly sort of guilty starting off talking about some of the challenges, but I'm hoping that some of the things I'll cover now will be sort of informative and set some of the scene for what the panel discussion will come on to when we look at some of the opportunities of use of AI and machine learning in shipping. As I say, my entry into the world of AI has been around IP in particular, so I'll start with that. I'll talk about some of the areas that we're focusing on with our clients by way of legal advice and legal challenges, just to give you a flavour for the sort of things that are going on in that world. So in relation to intellectual property, it's had a lot of press coverage over the last few months, particularly around the use of training data for large language model, Gen AI in particular. So what I'm talking about here is, in order for an AI to work effectively, it needs to be trained on an awful lot of data. And the issue is that traditionally, over the last few years, if we take something like ChatGPT as an example, they're sucking up just millions of bits of data and content to use to train these models. And now the challenge is, did they have the right to do that? Because a lot of that content and data is owned by third parties, covered by intellectual property rights. So there are a number of cases that are pending in the courts now against some of these big players, where rights owners are saying you didn't have the right to feed all of that data into your model to train it. So those cases will probably start delivering verdicts over the next sort of 9, 12, 18 months. So this is kind of changing landscape, really. Some of the governments are trying to legislate in respect of, protecting rights holders, but also freeing up, development in AI. So it's an evolving area in relation to IP, which is quite critical. If we put it into the shipping sector, obviously, some of these AI tools are processing or training on massive amounts of data around, weather conditions, sea currents, particular data around ships, and the way they perform in certain sort of conditions. And the question really is, you need a lot of data, but do you have the right to use it to train the AI model? And then on the flip side, when you're actually looking at the AI outputs, quite famously, some of these AI tools are producing content that replicates pre-existing work, and there are cases going through at the moment where an AI model, nobody really knows how it's producing what it's producing, because it's kind of like a black box, but it's doing something that looks exactly like something that pre-existed, and there's obviously a copyright there. So that's the IP side, and it's been doing quite a lot of work with clients around that. But all sorts of other areas. I mean, data privacy is a big one. If we think about the uses that AI is being deployed for things like targeted advertising, facial recognition in security, all sorts of things that engage on privacy rights. So that's a key area. And that feeds into things like employment law and discrimination. A lot of organizations are using AI by way of screening job applications, and if the AI model has some sort of built-in bias, unintentional, you can face discrimination claims and everything else. So that's another key legal area we're advising on. I mean, as I think most people know, governments are desperately trying to regulate AI and its use. And I think the EU is probably the fastest along in that with the EU AI Act, which will come into force later this year, early 2024. And that's trying to regulate particularly what they call high-risk AI. So the EU is taking the position of just prohibiting certain uses. Be interesting to see how other governments or other regional legislators will look at that, because there may well be a difference across geographies as to what is allowed and what isn't. It engages things like consumer protection and product liability. A lot of consumer products now have AI elements within them, and that engages some interesting new laws around protecting consumers against bad things that can happen. The other thing we're doing is setting up ethics and governance sort of structures and frameworks with clients. A lot of organizations are looking at bringing in AI more widely into their organizations, and how do they do that in an ethical manner, and how do they put a sort of governance layer around how they're using AI. So we've been doing work with clients on that front. But I'm going to finish in sort of to talk about what I call sort of like old school sort of civil liability, sort of contract claims, insurance claims, things like negligence and duty of care. Because these concepts, these legal concepts are as old as the hills, but they have to kind of adapt to the new world of AI. And it's not necessarily straightforward. So if we take something like whether an AI, some kind of service that's implemented or enhanced by AI or machine learning, if it's producing something which is it up to the reasonable standard expected under contract, or is it insofar as the relationship is one where there's a duty of care, has there been a duty of care in the way that's been deployed, or has that been breached? Because we're dealing with different standards now. Typically, if we take a duty of care in a negligence case, you're comparing what performance has been against a human. Now you've got an AI-enhanced service or tool. What is the requisite standard that you need to apply? And also, how do you deal with what's gone wrong? I mean, as I say, most of these exciting AI tools are so-called black box. The person deploying it in shipping, whatever it happens to be, you don't know what's in it, you don't know how it works, and you don't know how it's producing the results that it may be producing. And actually the developer may not know the last one, because as you know, AI tools can produce all sorts of responses that nobody can really understand how it got there. So how do you determine causation? If something goes wrong, let's take a ship owner that's deploying some sort of AI tool to improve safety in its workforce, and something goes wrong and a seafarer is injured. I mean, has the AI machine malfunctioned? Is the data it was trained on faulty? Has it been deployed incorrectly by the ship owner? Was it meant to be some sort of human intervention that wasn't sort of deployed properly? So there's all sorts of challenging issues around very traditional civil liability issues that arise in AI, which are yet to be determined. I mean, these are all things that are going to be rolling out over the next few years. But then, just to finish, turning it on its head, if there is an AI tool out there which can significantly improve crew safety, and a ship owner takes the decision that they're not going to deploy it, and somebody gets injured, are they then walking into a negligence claim because they're not prepared to adopt what is now maybe the best-in-class solution? So these things are going to be shifting over the years as the world gets to grips with the use of AI, and particularly some of the legal issues that arise. So I'll finish there and hand over to others who can talk about more interesting opportunities.
I enjoyed it. Very interesting to look at the challenges. Let me then have a look at the opportunities. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics are definitely a transformative force when it comes to in shipping and maritime. And we have seen already several examples when it comes to improving efficiency, improving sustainability, improving operation. And I'd like to, get through some of the examples, some of the things that we as Inmarsat have been exposed, that we've been participating in different projects. Inmarsat, for the last 40 years, has been defining connectivity as sea. We've been providing connectivity services and safety services to seafarers at sea. My name is Marco Cristoforo Camporeale. I'm Senior Director of Strategy and Business Development at Inmarsat. I will start with safety, our DNA at Inmarsat. And I have at least 3 areas where we have seen and we have been involved as Inmarsat. The first area is improving situational awareness and providing aid to navigation at sea. We have seen sensor fusion, we have seen connecting weather data, LiDAR, radar, different cameras, and actually offering a better vision and identification of obstacles in navigation at sea. We have seen also a higher level of improvement in the areas of surveillance inside the ship, especially now with the introduction of a new type of fuel, with the ammonia. It's really important to take care of any leakage. So we have seen different sensors, smell, and also different cameras, and get together to understand the location of possible leakages for ammonia, which is a deadly gas, for instance. But we have seen also collecting data from the crew, which is operating, and connecting those data to cameras and understand whether the crew is getting in an hazard, is actually operating in a risky situation. Another thing that we have been working still on safety is evolution of the global maritime distress signal system, and actually moving from a reactive system where the captain will press a button, it calls for, it makes a distress call, and we get the rescue to the ship. Moving to a more proactive, actually continuously collecting data, specific data from different sensors, from different machinery, and then have an understanding of the situation of the ship. And if it is at risk, actually call the risk center before actually a reaction from the crew, and save important minutes that can save lives. This is for safety. Another area has been efficiency. Now, we have been involved into collecting data from the ship and using this data to meet compliance when it comes to decarbonization and reporting primarily to the European community. But we have seen also the use of data and machine learning beyond to deliver decarbonization beyond compliance, and actually start to get speed optimization, route optimization, to start to build those ESG credentials that ship owners and ship managers need in order to get the more lucrative charters, in order to get into the green corridors, in order to get access to green loans and cheaper loans, cheaper cost of capital. We have mentioned earlier, also collecting data from machinery and together with in physics, so physics AI informed algorithm, build a predictive model of the health of the machinery, and therefore have an idea of the likelihood of a failure. We also seen streamline, together with connectivity, streamlining the communication between ship to shore and actually getting in the area of improving logistics, so having an understanding, having a forecast of demand, having have better management of inventory, routing the element of the supply chain, and again, improve the efficiency of the overall supply chain. Improving the automation, the third area is the one of autonomous ships. We were just a couple of weeks ago and in Tokyo at the British Embassy. We were meeting some of our partners and customers like NYK Noel, and we were celebrating how far they, especially in Japan, have got when it comes to autonomous ships. Just in May 22, so not far ago, NYK had been successflucly sealing a 750 gross ton general cargo ship in the Japanese Bay for more than 800 kilometers and safely performing more than 100 collision avoidance operations. And it's a triumph of artificial intelligence, but with that comes also challenges, and one of the challenges that we have, that we are involved in, is to deliver a certainty of connectivity to this type of ship, meaning a connectivity which is dependable, which we cannot allow any outages, we connect when the ship is connected. Is high performing, we need a high level of bandwidth in order for these ships to connect and to operate. And we need a high level of security, military security when it comes to them. And when it comes to security, it's the last point I would like to touch. We are using artificial intelligence, as we were discussing, to combat and to counterattack cyber threats. So we use artificial intelligence in cyber security systems that we have, like in threat management systems today. At the same time, I will not, we already have about the challenges. The challenges are about privacy, about the data, where the data comes from. The challenges are about, again, connectivity, especially when it comes to ship to shore, and is about the process and the standards. So I would like to conclude, when it comes to artificial intelligence, we have seen a lot of opportunities. We are involved in developing a lot of these use cases, but it's not only about the technology. It's about getting the standards, the regulation, the processes, and about, I keep saying, a collaboration between the different parties, the different stakeholders, especially when it comes to the shipping industry, because the data that are required to train those algorithms and to deploy those algorithms are actually shared, and we need to collaborate, we need to work together if we want to realize the benefits that artificial intelligence, the opportunities that artificial intelligence is promising. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, when I was trying to write my notes for this sort of last night, suddenly realising how are we meant to fit all of this into a hour worth of paddling, trying to fit everything into just a sort of 5-minute introduction. That's quite a challenge. And as obviously the two speakers before me have said, that this is a complex problem, and it's not going to be simple solutions here. It is going to be take a lot of work by a lot of different people across the board from different parts of the sector, both in the maritime sector and outside the maritime sector, to actually come up with good solutions here. And I don't know whether it's as a boring academic or as a security person, but I'm still very sceptical on AI, very cynical. It has its place, there are very useful uses for AI when we come to missions, logistics, but I still think we need to urge a lot more caution than we are when we're adapting these sort of technologies moving forward. Particularly in the academic space, the changes that we have seen in the last 6 months since the release, or sort of more public release of ChatGPT, as academics, we've had to change the way we're doing our assessments with students, the way we, verify whether work has actually been produced by students as well. It has taken some changes to our work programs, and as we move forward, maritime is an aging sector. It's normally quite slow to change, and it's rapidly adapting these technologies. We do need to take that sort of step back sometimes and understand what the implications of this adoption actually looks like. I think we've alluded to it slightly. I think there's sort of two different timelines that we need to be considering at the moment. Both have their benefits, but both do have their challenges. So the short term, that's the now. There are applications being used for logistics, for route planning and things like that that are actually very useful, very helpful. But actually, they do raise questions. One, who's developing these systems? Which people are actually developing it? Is it third-party service providers? Is it in-house people? Are they computer scientists? Are they operations experts? Who is actually doing it? Because each of these people will have very different priorities and very different knowledges. And as one of the things that keeps getting raised with when we look at remote and autonomous vessels is things like how do we convert coal regs into something that a computer can understand? So if we're getting a computer scientist writing these algorithms, these models, do they have a good enough understanding of the requirements of the sector, both operationally and regulatory, to actually operate correctly? How are they being secured? As I said, we've got large data sets training these models. We've seen what data poisoning can do to certain data sets. It only takes a small percentage of that data to be manipulated, the algorithm to give you unexpected results. I have a colleague that's looked at a serial error, and all it takes is a patch, a certain pattern stuck to the side of an object, and your image recognition cannot pick it up, it misreads it. So how are these systems going to be protected? We're very used to protecting data sets, particularly around personal data, all the documents involved in just shipping in general, very good at protecting them. But are we good enough to protect the data sets behind this? Interesting conversation before we started here is if that data set stays in the company, that might actually be easier to protect, but if that data set is more publicly available and lots of people have access to it, we start increasing the security risks there. What if things go wrong? Again, we're relying on these algorithms to give us results. We're expecting to see certain results from them, so we trust them, we rely on them. But what if they're wrong? What if they've come up with, you can type into ChatGPT and it will come up with a result that isn't actually what you were expecting. There's a piece of knowledge or theory in there that isn't quite right, and you can challenge it and say that's not right, and it comes back and says, oh no, you are correct, and here is this new knowledge. But it takes 2 attempts potentially to get there. In some certain situations, some applications, 2 attempts isn't good enough, and it needs to be right every time, particularly when safety is involved. And what do we do if it stops working? How do we respond to that? If we're using these to do large processes and streamline quite complex processes, are we able to almost backtrack and go back to picking up the phone, using a pen and paper, sending an email? Are those processes still involved in the organisation? And are they still practiced as well? What we saw with the WannaCry attack a few years ago in the NHS was some of the hospitals actually handled it very well where their technology went down because they just went back to paper. Whereas actually other organisations struggled because they hadn't practiced that method, they'd forgotten how to do it. So again, it's a very complex question, and as we move towards sort of remote and more autonomy in the space, those challenges, those problems are only going to get larger. So moving into that sort of second timeline, that long term then, what does the future actually hold? So if we come around back to the model itself, how do we prove and verify that that model is actually accurate and reliable? That takes time. We've already said it takes a lot of data to feed that. At the minute, there's still a lack of data around certain things within the maritime sector. So we've still got to build those data sets up. We've still got to verify these algorithms. And yes, NYK have done some testing, that 700-kilometre route that they did. Yes, that's very good verification. But again, that's technically just one voyage. Yes, they were running simulations of collision avoidance during that as well. But again, it's going to take more than just one 700-kilometre journey to prove that these systems are reliable, they're accurate. We're starting to see, particularly with the EU, some form of regulation, some form of standards being produced for AI. But again, we're not seeing a huge amount of movement on those yet, but they're generic. What we've seen in the maritime space, you look at the standards for maritime equipment more broadly, there are very specific standards looking at maritime equipment. It must do this because it has to cope with the environmental and operational requirements that the maritime sector places on those devices and networks. And it's the same with AI. These are going to be used in applications in the maritime sector, so we need to work out how does that impact their actual use and their application. We are seeing a lot of sort of off-the-shelf AI, machine learning sort of models being used that people, academics are publishing, and people are picking them up going, oh, that works really well, we can try that and put that into an application. So again, they're picking up something that's already designed that wasn't designed for the maritime sector, trying to apply it to the maritime sector, and that could potentially introduce problems and challenges as we move forward. And how are people trained as well? AI is this big thing, we're streamlining processes, we're able to take the human out of that process, but we're not removing the human. That is one of the big myths with AI, we don't remove the human. There's still a human involved in there somewhere. Whether they're reading the output from that model, or whether they're the ones training that model, there is still a human involved. So we need to make sure that those people are trained to understand how the model works, opening that black box almost to teach people how it works, so they can understand what data it's using, how that response has been given to them, so they can then start verifying whether that's correct or not. The master does this every day on the bridge. When he's looking out the window, he's picking up that situational awareness cues and adapting operations as they go. It's the same here. We're now relying on these AI models. We need to be able to see what's in them and train people to understand them so they can make better decisions from them as well. And helping with that reliance and some of that verification as well. And again, it comes back to what if things go wrong. At the moment, we're seeing smaller applications like route planning, logistics platforms and things using AI. But in the future, if we move towards autonomous vessels that have a lot more AI built into them, what response mechanisms are built in when that model breaks or doesn't work? I'm not saying to say it will break, but what if it does break? Have we got measures in place that's able to us to respond to an incident where that model no longer works as expected? So how do we move forward and make the most of the opportunities that AI and machine learning actually provides to us as a sector? And I think that comes down to three things, which is kind of the summary of where we are at the moment. So ensuring that security is baked in. I mean, that is a standard response, that is basic cybersecurity 101, but making sure security is thought about from day one. Where that data is coming from, where the data set is stored, how we're protecting the actual model itself, who's interacting with it, what communication networks are we using to bring that data from ship to shore or shore to ship. We have to think about the bare bones, the basics here. We are adding more and more data to operations, therefore we need to think about that security from day one. And that security doesn't mean just involving security experts and computer scientists. That involves everybody from management all the way down to a rating on board. Everybody needs to be involved in that decision to help with security. And we are starting to see that with cybersecurity on board more generically, but again, it needs to move forward. We need more regulations, governance and standards to help support the development of these AI models. Yes, the EU have got quite a harsh line on some things and basically saying we can't use in certain applications. We need to be careful we don't stifle innovation. Because yes, there are opportunities here for AI, and there are a lot of companies actually looking for guidance from the regulators to sort of say, we can use it in this way, it must be done in this way. So they don't spend a lot of money developing these models that are then basically turned around and said, you can't use those. So we need to be very proactive at this point about how we manage and govern the models themselves. And obviously that needs to consider that maritime nuance as well at the same time. And then the third and final one here is that training. I do a lot of work around digital skills with seafarers, and again, it is that thing of training will always be needed. As I say, whether that's the person building it, who are computer scientists, not operators, they may need maritime context awareness, all the way to the user who may actually need that security context of how to use that safely. And again, we still need to train people how to respond if that model doesn't actually work as expected. So I think that summarises most of it. Thank you very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will be using my notes. I don't think I'm as disciplined a speaker as the others, because if I try to freestyle this, there's no way I'm getting 7 minutes. Good morning. I'm very pleased to be here, and I thank the organisers for the invitation to participate in the forum. By way of a quick introduction, everybody knows Inmarsat. I'm not sure how many of you know CIRM. I'm Secretary General of CIRM, which is the International Association for Marine Electronics Companies. We're a non-profit global technical association, and our core interest is in bridge navigation and communication systems. We've over 100 member companies across the world, and that encompasses the full spectrum of marine electronics, from manufacturers to the service providers. This short presentation is going to focus on what I see as the main opportunities of the application of artificial intelligence to marine navigation, centered on the ship's navigation bridge. I've not got long, so let's get right into it. Collision avoidance today is achieved through observance of the rules of the road and the training and experience of watchkeeping personnel and crew the boats. These practices are supported by target tracking on ARPA radar integrated with AIS data. There are undoubtedly opportunities for the technological component of collision avoidance procedures to be enhanced through the application of AI, which is capable of improving situational awareness by continuously monitoring the ship's surroundings using sensors such as radar, LiDAR cameras, providing real-time alerts and collision avoidance recommendations to the crew. Studies do show that AI can analyze data faster and more accurately than humans, which, if carefully and thoughtfully implemented, should reduce the risk of collisions. In particular, there have been massive improvements in the field of computer vision in recent years, whereby AI systems are now capable of recognizing and interpreting images and videos with remarkable accuracy. Although Rory may disagree. Route optimization is an aspect of ship operations that's seen significant development in the last couple of decades, fundamentally because a more optimal route saves the shipping company money, results in fewer emissions, and may actually be safer. Through improvements in fields such as reinforcement learning, AI has the potential to improve route optimization. Today, for example, there are companies that are offering AI augmented weather reading solutions. AI systems can analyze complex factors such as weather data, sea conditions, and historical navigation data to suggest what may be more optimal routes. This applies to the bridge as well as the company's office on shore. Shipside voyage planning stations are becoming increasingly sophisticated, and some already boast AI-enhanced optimization features. I think that AI developments on the bridge will continue apace, but for the foreseeable future, these will be restricted to the so-called back-of-bridge support systems, which are subject to fewer regulations. But considering the key role of ECDIS in route planning and route monitoring, it's not hard to envisage a future ECDIS enhanced by AI. A lot of that is dependent on the appetite for IMO to allow such. Gesture recognition is often cited as having the potential to enhance bridge operations, whereby officers on future bridges will be able to command ships without actually touching any instruments. It's been suggested that watchkeeper gestures could be quicker and more effective than using physical controls. There's a field of AI research dedicated to gesture recognition, so it's not difficult to see this as an area of the future bridge could be enhanced through the application of AI. Related to this is voice recognition, and while there have been many developments in the AI field of natural language processing, the bridge may be an unsuitable environment for voice recognition. You know, it can be very noisy. We're all aware that the direction of travel is toward autonomous navigation. I'm sure we're also all aware of the close relationship between autonomous navigation and artificial intelligence. I'll use the IMO terminology MAS here, meaning maritime autonomous ships. Besides the fusing of sensor data to build up situational awareness and avoid collisions that I've already talked about, AI systems enable autonomous maneuvering of a mass, such as docking and berthing, and harnessing machine learning can improve an AI system's navigational decision making. The precise impact of mass on the navigation bridge is currently subject to quite a bit of theory and speculation, but there will definitely be an impact. Of course, the extent of this is dependent on the degree of autonomy being considered, but from IMO degrees of autonomy 2 through 4, AI will play a key role. I think it's safe to say that a MAS will require an AI-based controller that will interface to the ship's equipment, including the bridge equipment, and be able to make changes to operational parameters in order to execute decisions. This means that those bridge systems will require a digital interface, including those that currently do not have one. Magnetic compass is an example of such a system that currently lacks a digital interface. MAS will require an increase in sophistication and interconnection of ship-based networks on the bridge and below decks, and this of course has cybersecurity implications. And that brings me on to cybersecurity. Until relatively recently, the main cyber risk faced by computer-based bridge systems was being infected by malware, whether inadvertently or maliciously, through a directly connected peripheral device. However, as bridge systems have become more interconnected within networks, on the bridge and more widely across the ship, network security has become important. And now that it's not uncommon for bridge systems to be connected to the internet, cybersecurity considerations have ramped up accordingly. The trend of bridge systems being connected to other systems inside and outside of the ship will only continue and will be critical to the functioning of MAS, thereby increasing cyber risk. However, as Corey has touched upon, AI-driven cybersecurity solutions can help protect these systems and connections from cyber attacks and ensure the integrity and safety of navigation systems through machine learning enhanced threat detection, vulnerability management, network monitoring, predictive analysis, and so on. That brings me to the end of this short presentation. Obviously, we'll be able to touch on the potential to harness AI for smarter ship bridges. I've focused on the areas that I feel are most interesting or impactful. I'm sure I look forward to hearing how you disagree with them afterwards. I wish to conclude by expressing the view that whatever the potential benefits of AI, it is critical to implement solutions carefully and thoughtfully in a way that complements the skills and experience of trained seafarers who remain the navigational experts. AI should make the navigators' difficult job easier and should not overwhelm them with yet more information. Thank you.
So thank you to our panelists, and I think that really sets the stage for the discussion part of this, which, in my opinion, always is the most fun and usually the most important to drive the discussion. I know in the panel it's about opportunities, but I want to kind of go back to something that a couple of panelists talked about were the challenges and what those look like. Even more so from the legal perspective, but the regulatory compliance, and I guess I'll shoot it to you first, Richard, because when you look at global maritime regulation, the IMO is where this starts. If you talk to flag states, the flag states defer to IMO and say, hey, we're not going to do anything, until IMO kind of moves forward, and then you have the U.S. Coast Guard over here who does a lot of interesting things. What, from that perspective, from the regulatory compliance, when we look at, we're just now seeing the beginnings of regulatory with cybersecurity. What do you see as, I guess, through the IMO as potentially some of the challenges when we look at, how do you regulate AI in maritime?
Thank you, Corey. In the world of the bridge equipment manufacturers, IMO is fundamental, as it is, I think, across the shipping industry. The way that IMO regulates equipment, especially at the front of the bridge, those critical navigation systems, is through the carriage requirements and performance standard model. When a performance standard is adopted by IMO and comes into force, it kind of freezes technological development effectively until that performance standard is opened for revision in future. And that is a lengthy and complicated process. Now, obviously there's a reason for that. Safety is paramount, of course it is, and the IMO takes every effort to ensure that its performance standards make systems as safe as possible. Therefore, they don't want systems being changed willy-nilly. But at the same time, if a company or an industry is looking to innovate, that the long lead time on being able to actually make changes to equipment does hamper development, as well as ensuring safety. And in fact, sometimes the hampering of development can negatively impact safety because features or functions that may serve to improve the safety of a system can't be implemented until the associated change is made to the regulations. So I'm not being IMO, of course.
Right.
I go to IMO meetings all the time and participate on behalf of my organisation, but the fact is that an IMO performance standard and the modern IMO equipment regulation does pose a major obstacle in terms of innovation.
And when you look at that, it's a really interesting dichotomy of, I think you first mentioned it, Jonathan, of, the protection, that we want to put in place, but also we don't want to stifle, the development. And from the legal perspective, that's pretty interesting about, where we're at, because, and when we talked before, and it's not really the best comparative example, but when we were talking before, is about cryptocurrencies. You see all this innovation in cryptocurrency, and now you see regulation, and regulation is almost backtracking, against that. Do you think we'll see some of that, from a legal perspective when we look at, AI and how that's, going to develop, or really going to develop forward, more so in the courts?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the biggest challenge for organisations on the legal side is just its uncertainty. There is a significant amount of uncertainty as to how some of this is going to finally roll out with court decisions. I mean, I can't predict. I mean, Microsoft is being sued in California in relation to its Copilot software AI drafting production tool. I don't know what the outcome of that is. I mean, I know how Microsoft are defending it, but that breeds a great deal of uncertainty. It will, as you say, it will get backfilled over time. If you take the EU AI Act, the high-risk categories of AI deployment, one of them is critical infrastructure. So controlling road traffic is high risk, because it's going to be regulated in a certain way. A range of what we're talking about here in shipping, I suspect, likely will fall within high-risk categories under the EU AI Act. But we don't know yet. We don't know how that's going to work. And it will be different with different sorts of technologies. And as I say, uncertainty is the worst thing, because people want answers and you can't actually give them answers. I mean, although Microsoft, I don't know if anybody saw this last week, in relation to their Copilot products, it's both content writing and code, they're offering what they call full indemnification for customers. So that's one way of getting certainty, is Microsoft says, well, you don't worry about it, we'll pick up the bill if somebody sues you for intellectual property infringement. I mean, I've not seen the indemnity, I imagine it's rather carefully written, so when it gives you that much certainty, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge.
And it's interesting too to see that with what the EU is doing, potentially discussions in the UK, the United States, and other countries around the world, and then the IMO factor, and how this is all going to be deconflicted as it moves forward, because maritime is very unique, and how we operate is much different than when you look at smart cities, smart corridors, and how vehicles and and traffic moves. So The legal, I'm very interested in that piece because that's kind of what, drives that innovation to say. And also, I guess you could say, the dark side of it is there's still going to be development done on these things that are even potentially illegal because not every individual or every country is going to want to play right, in the proverbial sandbox too.
Yeah, that's certainly the case, and I think that is a challenge for the EU, the United States, other countries that want to put some kind of control and regulation around this. They don't want to stifle it at the same time because there will be other regions and countries that will take a different approach, and that there is a real risk that development in certain places will be left behind. But I mean, coming on to maritime in particular, I suspect that what is going to end up happening is there will be multiple regulatory regimes that will need to be adhered to for use of AI in the sector. You'll have overarching regulations at EU level, or what it happens to be, and then those specific to shipping. So it's not going to get easier, but there will be multiple layers.
So I want to change gear a little bit, and Marco, and come to you. And I mentioned before about, like smart cities and the corridors that are being built. Those are based on, on terrestrial-based cellular communication system, and the communication system obviously in the maritime is completely different. You don't have a cell tower, every 4 or 5 miles that's operating at, a gigabit of bandwidth up and down. So from that perspective on the communication side, that's probably going to be one of the most key or one of the biggest elements to, how AI works in the future. And what does that look like, from your perspective, from what's happening at Inmarsat?
Let's kind of bring it a bit back to reality right now. Just that there are around 140,000 ships registered at night, ships that are above 500 coastals. Of these 140,000 ships, only about just short of 30,000 actually have a VSAT communication, meaning be able to get around the 4, 5, 6 megabit per second. The remaining 110,000, they are still working on, let's say, basic level of connectivity on L-band in the terms of hundreds of kilometers. That's the reality today compared to taking, I'm very much like your comment on how people who are taking algorithms developed in university in an area where in your lab you have fiber with 1 gigabit per second, and then you put it on the ship and nothing works or works then exactly because it's a completely different level of communication. So that's reality today. Now there is a lot of development when it comes to satellite networks, both geostationary or low Earth orbit. There is integration or fusion of different satellite technologies. There is integration also of terrestrial technology, so that you get close to shore, you get access to terrestrial LTE. There has been also development, also as Inmarsat, we are developing terrestrial mesh networks in order to get telecommunication of even up to 500 megabit per second, very far offshore. At the end, telecommunication access to connectivity is the key enabler in order to get the data off the ship. Because we were still, again, we were discussing earlier, one of the key elements is that we are missing data. We are missing data in different areas. And I remember back in my time in Rostros, my shipping intelligence, we were discussing, we were building models for machine learning for engines. And one of the problems that we had is that we had lab data and ship data about how the engine is performing. But what happened is that we wanted to predict the failures of the engine. And therefore we needed patterns, failure patterns. And these things don't fail so often. So it was really difficult to actually get data of failures that we could actually predict a failure happening. So telecommunication is key, is a key enabler. There is a lot happening in bringing communication, a new type of constellation of satellite up in the sky in order to bring communication to a ship. But remember, the reality today is 1 ship out of 6, sorry, 5 ships out of 6, they practically are able just to send emails, plus the basic safety system. So there is a lot to do, and there is a lot to get before machine learning and AI algorithms actually are really spread in an industry which is still so conservative on that.
Thank you. So do you want to jump in? I mean,
Yes, it wasn't just to add something. I think you're absolutely correct, but I think it's the 150,000 are the ones that I'm probably the most concerned about, because they haven't got that connectivity. But as soon as somebody comes out with a certain use of AI that actually saves money, or it has enough benefit, you will get people jumping on that bandwagon, increasing connectivity on board a ship that hasn't ever had that much connectivity before, and then introducing risks not just to that ship, but to the data set that other ships that might be more secure are actually feeding off of. And that's in itself just a whole scary case of security issue.
And allow me if I want to add another number. So remember these 140,000 ships. There are around 25,000 ship owners in the industry, but only 45 ship owners have more than 100 ships. The average ship owner fleet is between 4 and 5 ships. So it means that you have the big names, NYK, MOL, meshed with 900 ships, and then you have a long tail of people with 1 ship. And when it comes to cybersecurity, and when it comes to the capabilities and the skills and the training that these people have to bring any of those technology on board, that is scary. I agree with you.
well, I'm going to jump in on that really quick before we toss to the audience for questions. And it was something that you mentioned, Rory, was the training piece. Do you see from what you're doing at the university, is the training side, the human factor, keeping up with the advancements in technology? Because that's what we hear the most about is AI and advancements, and this whole panel could have been done by AI, right? But joking, it wasn't. We wrote our own speeches. It wasn't done by ChatGPT. We laughed about that earlier, so I didn't bring it up. But the human factor, do you see that moving, the training piece moving as quickly as the development of the actual, AI systems? Because I think that's important. When you talk about the bridge side, when you talk about the legal side, the communication is the people piece of that is key to really, I think, making that work.
I mean, yes and no. We're at the moment where AI is still not that, it's around, but it's not that common. So we've got time to get that training in and start understanding what that training looks like. But until we start seeing more applications, we won't know necessarily what that full training looks like. But then it comes back to, actually, more basic training about cybersecurity, about general navigation and things. You're taught about how to protect the system using good passwords, not clicking on phishing links, as long as different types of navigational techniques. When ECDIS goes down, paper charts. You're taught all of that. So it's making sure that actually those skills, those basic skills, are still there. But we've got some basis to build this on. But as I said, it's only 6-7 months ago when ChatGPT was sort of more publicly accessible, that even as academics we had to reassess how we were doing things and suddenly change our work processes. And we're academics who work in this kind of space. We should be used to this. We should see this coming. But actually, even we struggle to keep up with that. So, what is not trying to speak badly of the sector, but a sector that's already struggling to keep up with, say, cybersecurity awareness training?
Yeah.
How are we ever going to expect that sector then to keep up with the advancements in AI? As I say, they're a long way off from being commonplace. We have some time to be able to adapt to that. And again, it's going to take movement like the IMO to actually say, we need cyber competencies at a certain degree, that then actually those competencies will help cover some of protecting that algorithm, that model, that data set as well, as a sort of a byproduct of those.
Yes, and just to add to that point on training, of course, it will be critical that seafarers are properly trained on the systems they will be using. As Rory says, when it comes to AI, we might be a little bit far away at this point from being able to determine the training requirements. However, there's an analog, something called S100 ECDIS. I'm not going to get into that because that's a long seminar and so on, but it's effectively the next generation of ECDIS. And IMO has just finish the performance standards that will facilitate the introduction of the next generation ECDIS. And now, so that was the NCSR subcommittee of IMO that did the performance standards. And now the HTW subcommittee is presumably going to be considering the associated training requirements of seafarers suddenly being faced with this new ECDIS with a lot of new functionality, operating in a different way to the ECDIS that they're accustomed to. So I think that gives an idea of how it will filter through the IMO process when we do have, I guess, a tangible AI-based or AI-augmented system that's been regulated by IMO.
It's just interesting, obviously the IMO takes a long time, as you've alluded to get anywhere. So we're at the point actually then that we need to start thinking about the application of AI now, so that in 8 years' time, 5 to 8 years' time, when the IMO actually puts a document into reality, we're prepared for that.
It would be a really nice idea. IMO is extremely busy. It has an enormous workload, particularly on the Maritime Safety Committee, as any of you who are working in and around IMO are aware. So yes, that would be excellent. Any member state, of course, is able to put a proposal into the committees to say this is what we need to be thinking about. I'm a little bit skeptical that it will result in what we would like it to result in.
And it'll be interesting to see just, the dichotomy of what the different member states are thinking when it comes to that, and how development is going to be so diverse just across there. So it's definitely an interesting issue. Like I said at the beginning, this is just scratching the surface, and in 10 years from now, it'll be interesting to compare the discussion of this panel with what the panel of the future looks like when we talk about AI and where we're at.
Well, you will probably just have 4 ChatGPT and
we'll be on a screen, or we'll be on a beach somewhere and be like, oh yeah, we're doing that presentation today. So just put the computer up there to do it. With that, I'd love to open it up to the audience. If you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand, jump in. Meredith is our game show host and holder of the microphone. We have one in the back. And like I said, I'll divert all the hard questions to these guys.
Thank you very much for this stimulating session with Gracie also. This time in the morning is very good. You alluded to the training. One of the things you didn't talk about was the de-skilling effect on the people who are using this technology. You've seen it from the start of any new system coming on initiative. It has impacted these skills people in engineering, all the areas we work in. How do we act with that? There's no point in training people on a certain base when they're already losing fundamental knowledge.
It's a very good question. We're very good at the moment as a sector in terms of what competencies are still required. We've had ETS on board for 30-something years, 25, 30 years now. But we're still teaching, paper navigation. I know at Plymouth we still teach some of the celestial navigation skills as well. So we're still teaching some of those skills, but whether you're teaching them and then keeping them fresh are two separate conversations. So I think as long as the sector keeps those sort of competencies there while introducing new technologies, we can keep some of those skills alive. And it's going to take a good 15, 25 years for these systems to be completely on every single ship in the world's fleet, to be commonplace. So actually we're still going to need those more traditional skills, because there's still going to be the older ships that haven't got those technologies built in where those skills are still required. But as I say, it's about keeping those skills fresh. We've had a variety of people come into our simulator, from 5 years of experience all the way up to 35 years of experience, and asking them to do certain things, potentially after 35 years of experience. They haven't done it since they did their academy training 35 years ago. So it's about keeping those skills fresh, and that's the challenge in itself. The training load on board ships, the time to do that training is already very, very tight. So trying to add more skills into that question is an even harder challenge. But one, I think, is just a matter of thinking through what skills need to remain and what skills might not necessarily need to be there so much in the future. That's probably an IMO question rather than a ship-specific question.
Yeah, I think it is a great question. As a representative of a technologically focused organisation is run, I hear a question like that regularly. I think that shows, as Rory says, it shows that everybody's bearing it in mind. I don't think there's any chance of it being buried, and I don't think anybody's interested in the crew becoming just a group of systems engineers. I think everybody wants mariners trained in the traditional skills of seamanship who are also able to use these increasingly sophisticated systems. I can speak for certainly CIRM members, although they are proponents of putting technology on ships. A lot of them are former mariners, and they all observe and believe in the importance, as far as I'm aware, of properly trained seafarers. The question of how we achieve it, well, I think Rory's had a good go at answering that. I don't think there's any danger of us overlooking these questions, and certainly it's something that's regularly brought up in and around IMO. IMO, of course, is again at the centre of everything, and seems to be maintaining a lot of importance on the fundamental concept. Mariners need to be properly trained in their traditional skills of seamanship.
Thank you. Anybody else want to jump in?
I'd like to add another number. We are missing, as an industry, 110,000 officers, meaning that, and it's a battle. I mean, as the effect for instance, Inmarsat is that 1 out of 3 seafarers looks at connectivity on board as being more important than salary when choosing which which ship manager to work. So just to give you how important it is to find actually the right skills, the right people. But the future, and it's one of the reasons why the shipping company in countries like Norway, Finland, and Japan, where there is a real lack of seafarers, they are really looking at a higher level of automation and even really pushing on autonomous ships in order to be able to do more with the few seafarers who still want to be on board for months and work. The average mission is 2.5 knots. So it will be that the level of skills for the seafarers who are on board will have to improve because there are simply less seafarers, and therefore we need a higher level of automation in order to keep running the ship and in order to keep the industry that is moving 80% of the global goods that the consumer will need. So it has to happen.
And it's interesting to look at what the seafarer of today looks like, because I can remember I started out as a navigation officer on a Coast Guard vessel, and it was all paper charts. The first thing that we were told with the computer is, don't believe the computer. You have your aids to navigation and the paper chart. And now everything, if you said that to a bridge officer, don't believe the computer, they're like, what? I've got like 5 of them here, through redundant ECTA systems. Of course I'm going to believe, the computer. So it's interesting to see on the shortage, because that's, I think, it speaks to a greater problem in our industry is recruiting seafarers. And it's not just the commercial side. We deal with cruise and with large yacht, and it's the exact same problem over there. Is the younger seafarers are looking at this connectivity as being, the biggest piece to say, can I send and receive emails? Can I get on social media? Can I still be as connected on board the ship as I can while I'm on shore? And to your point, with 5 or 6 ships not even having, basic VSAT service, that's really, that's really difficult. And I think as we evolve, the seafarer of the future is going to look very different than they do today, with the level of technical skills that I think are going to be needed to be able to run, the ship of the future. When you consider AI and technology and everything else, that's a part of that. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, hi. Richard Trotman, Safety Tech Accelerator. Quick questions to the panel, if I can, talking about navigating future assurance of AI. Take advantage of these advances and the applications that we talked about, which is fantastic. Could the panel give any thoughts, comments, perhaps, on use of synthetic environments to test AI, how they are, what we're doing and what we're talking about here?
I can give a comment back to my time, previous life at Roche Fulbright in Carlsberg. Again, because of a lack of data we had to build simulators. Simulators of based on real data from the ships and based on physics, our model of physics, simulator to which put all of our algorithms in order to interact and see how they were evolving. There is an entire branch on again, because there is lack of data and lack of communication on most of all the ships. There is an entire branch looking at the major OEMs are looking at building this environment and simulators where we can actually sort of a sandbox we can add those up to work. That's what we are.
So I work with Cybership Lab at Plymouth, where we have physical pieces of ship's bridge, and we replicate iterations of ship bridge in the physical space. Because digital twins have an excellent place, these sort of simulated environments are fantastic, but there are limitations in those. So whatever environment we create to potentially test the AI systems, they're only as good as that environment that they are tested within. So actually there is still a need to put them into the real space. If we use what's currently happening, say with seafarer training, they can use simulators to account for some of their sea time, but they still have to actually do real verified sea time. So again, simulators are useful to a certain degree, but we still need that real world. And that leads to that challenge that actually there is a lack of these actual events. The NYK, they had to simulate the collision avoidance stuff to get it to see if it could respond. And then comes back to that, do those results prove that in a real situation, it would give you the exact result you actually want? Because in simulation, it might. This simulated environment, how does that differ from the real? So there's still some challenges and questions that need to be answered in the long run. I think it's a very complex sort of space.
I mean, just to add that, I think that so far as the legal regulatory issue is concerned, I think it's almost impossible to undertake the kind of level of testing that's going to be required without using simulators. I just think it's impossible to get to a position where you've done sufficient testing to know that the system is safe. If all you're doing is doing it in the real world, I just don't think that's feasible. So it's going to be a combination. And actually, the level of testing when it comes to your legal liability issue is a big issue. I mean, it's going to be a big determinator in subsequent legal claims as to how well proven and tested a particular, say it's a navigation system, whatever it happens to be, is. So, yeah.
Rory, forgive me for being late. I'm Harry Charlie, I'm a partner in the firm. I should say senior consultant in the firm. I keep forgetting that every time. I seem to do it anyway, but anyhow. Look, I was at a UK government ministerial roundtable yesterday, and I just want to follow on from the point that Jonathan's just made. And it's the huge challenge that AI is going to face in maritime is the regulatory and legal framework. It is horrendously complicated. Maritime law, although based on English law, is very, very different to the laws that apply in everyday life. The law of the sea is a hugely complex area. And one of the concerns that certainly government of this country has, and I know other nations as well, is that you've got so many different layers of regulation and law. So you've got the IMO at the top that is supposed to basically coordinate what is going to happen. But all of us who work in the industry know they're never going to do that. So then you've got groupings of nation states, like the EU, who are going to go their own way, because that's what they do. And then you've got individual states who are tremendously powerful in maritime, like the US, like China, like the United Kingdom, who will have their own laws as well. So the question is, these regulations that are going to be so fundamental for AI are going to take a lot of hard work to make them globally effective. You don't want to be in a situation where you're using some kind of AI which is fine and dandy in one part of the world, but when you arrive in China, for example, it's not acceptable. And that's one of the issues that I think people like you are going to have to help us lawyers with. That's going to be a huge, huge challenge. And the good news is, at least the British government, I can tell you for sure, is very much on top of this. The Secretary of State for Transport is putting together a group of people, and I probably landed Jonathan and one of his colleagues on that committee, but he doesn't know that yet.
He does now.
But as I say, I'd be interested to have your views, because you guys understand AI. I mean, one of the points that was made yesterday is that anyone that doesn't understand AI is a bit of a moron in this day and age. So when I put my hand up and they said, "Who are you?" I said, "Harry Go Charlie the moron." It's really a fantastically difficult area. I find it difficult to grasp. There are things that you can do on board a vessel now that were science fiction only 40 years ago when I started, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So the world has moved on really quickly, and regulation and law have to keep up. Otherwise, it'll all be for naught.
I think the biggest challenge, if we look at where we're at right now, is the legal and the regulatory. I mean, sure, there are a number of development challenges and things with that, but to Harry's point, I think that's probably the biggest challenge, is how does this come together, especially in maritime? Because as you look historically, maritime moves a lot slower than the rest of the world because it's a global regulation, whereas the US can put regulations in place to say, here's how smart cities are going to work, but that doesn't necessarily apply, to the maritime.
We have a bit of a chicken and egg situation at the moment, where you're looking at the regulators, the standards organisations are looking to the people creating the AI models and applications to understand them better, than to be able to regulate them. But then the companies that are creating these applications are looking to the regulators and standards organisation to give them that guidance of what they need to look like. So it does take those people actually, as you say, coming together and actually having that conversation, bringing in the computer scientists who don't care about the maritime but just care about a particular type of AI model and application, all the way through to the lawyers who are going to be the ones that are fighting the court case when that gets put under scrutiny.
Yeah, Harry, we did have, shortly before you came in, we had a bit of a chat on this area, and I in particular was focusing on IMO and the challenges of getting anything through IMO. I perhaps didn't express my concerns as robustly as you just have, so thank you for that. But what you say is entirely right. We've seen it before in other, let's say, broad technological developments in and around IMO, where IMO has moved at the pace that IMO is accustomed to moving, effectively glacial pace, and so therefore there have been projects set up to support the work around the world. They've moved faster than IMO, and what we've ended up with are not harmonised regional solutions, and that is what we need to avoid, because, not only because we're an international association, I think it's in everybody's interest that we have one globally harmonised solution, whatever that might look like, or series of solutions. I think having events like this during London International Shipping Week are certainly the way to go, but frankly, the way that member states approach the work within IMO will be critical. It's good to see representatives of some member states here today.
I wanted to just set a bit of expectation. So IMO, as it has been, maritime, looking at after regulation maritime, as it has been also different organization in the aviation business, for instance, they will always follow an accident. Just really be clear that in the regulatory gap that exists, technology manufacturers, shipping companies will push the boundaries until something bad happens, and then IMO, or in general the flag state, they will react and say, "Oh, hold on a minute, it went too far." That's what happens. So this is very. They say we cannot expect the IMO to come to regulation before the technology comes. And there are a handful of nations that are protecting their own private interests. I'm talking, for instance, about Norway, because even if I'm Italian, I live in Norway. I live in the Arctic, actually. And in Norway, I've seen the industry coming up with the oil, and I've seen the crisis of the oil, and I've seen the government pushing, creating these zones where off-sea, where manufacturers like Kongsberg and Rolls-Royce could actually play, and with autonomous ships and test all this. The government are actually pushing certain technology also to protect their own interests. The same happened with the Finnish, this happening again with Japan. So the technology is going ahead, whether we think it's risky or not. And because the end user, meaning here, the shipping company, are fighting each other on small margins. As long as we users want to go on a platform like Amazon or Alibaba and click and get an O-ring or a screw from China all the way to Norway with the zero cost of shipping, the shipping industry has to fight on small margins, and they need to get to utilize machine learning, big data, AI in order to optimize how they operate beyond what humans can do on an Excel file. So that is happening because we as users are pushing the industry to get down on cost, and the industry has to react with, we are lacking seafarers, we are lacking ships, we are lacking connectivity, we are lacking data, we have to do something. And the industry is reacting with using all of these algorithms, route optimization, etc. When something else will happen, then IMO will react and say, hold on a minute, this went too far, let's start to put some boundaries. That's it. That's how. It's just to set expectations.
So it's 11 o'clock. I would like to conclude our panel. I would like to thank all of our panelists, Marco from Inmarsat, Rory from Plymouth University, Richard from CIRM, and Jonathan from Norton Rose Fulbright. Also like to thank our lovely host from Norton Rose Fulbright for allowing us to use this space. It's a great space for events. And thank you to London International Shipping Week. I know it's going to be a great week. We'll be around for a little bit. We have a little coffee and some snacks. So if you want to ambush one of the panelists afterwards, please do. And thank you to the audience for taking the time to join us this morning, and hope you have a good week. Thank you.